And can you just give me a bit of background about James, Jesus' brother, and his
Yeah.
conversion?
So the conversion of James isn't granted by as many scholars, but not many scholars write about him. When I did my doctoral research, I could only find nine. Let's see, is it nine? No, three. There was only like 29 scholars I found. Let's see, maybe it's nine. Forgive me. I think it's nine scholars. It's a very small percentage. It was like
Right.
9%, but there's only, it must be 9 scholars out of like 29. No, it was only 9%. It wasn't many at all. Hardly any scholars even talk about it. So it must have only been like 3 scholars. Must have been 3 scholars. 3 scholars out of 29 I found that even talk about things. Was James a non-believer prior to Jesus's death? That's what they're talking about there. So not many. You have Paul in 1 Corinthians 15. It says, then he appeared to James. And then you find James in Galatians 1. He's part of the Christian church. In Galatians 2, he's part of the church apostolic leadership. Josephus, Hegesippus, and Clement of Alexandria report the martyrdom of James, the brother of Jesus. So you have this, what's of interest, and what those 3 scholars out of the 29 that I found, what they don't acknowledge is that James was a non-believer prior to Jesus's death. The rest that do look at it, that they do think that Jesus was a non-believer if they comment on it. So, and there's good reason, I think, to hold that he was a non-believer. So, for example, I think it's at the end of Mark chapter 3, it says that Jesus' mother and brothers came to get him because they thought he was beside himself. In other words, they thought he was, something's going on here. So this is kind of embarrassing. Why would his brothers think he was beside himself?
Right.
And then in John chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, I think it is, they come to him and they say, hey, Jesus, look, we're going to go up to Jerusalem for the festival. Why don't you come with us? And you are doing these miracles. Don't do them in secret. Come on up to Jerusalem and do it publicly. And right before that, it said that those in Jerusalem, the Jewish leadership, were seeking to find Jesus so they might kill him. And so his brothers are saying, hey, why don't you do this stuff publicly in Jerusalem? So it's like they're egging him on. And then John says, because none of his brothers believed in him. All right. Now, the 3 scholars, I think it was James Tabor, John Painter, and Richard Bauckham. Those were the 3 that don't think that James was, at least at the time when I studied it. They didn't think that James was a non-believer. They interpret that differently. But I think it was a bunch of stretch, and I explain in my big book on the resurrection, that's like 700 pages, why I think they're wrong. Then you've got in John at Jesus's death, who does Jesus entrust the care of his mother to? Well, it's not to James. It's not to any of Jesus' brothers. And you would think if they were believers at the time that he would entrust the care of his mother to one of his brothers. But no, he entrusted to the beloved disciple. And I take that as Jesus is more concerned that his mother be taken care of by a brother in Christ than a blood brother.
Right.
So therefore, I think there's good evidence, good reason to think that none of Jesus' brothers were followers of Jesus prior to his death. But then afterward, we do find them as followers. And we find in 1 Corinthians 15, where it says, then he appeared to James. And like I said, you've got 3 accounts of James, his martyrdom, one of which is a non-Christian account. So I think there's good reason to see about the fate of James there.
Okay.